Um, just like to say, I'm delighted to be able to be with you this evening on this opening day of the conference. My name is Dr. Ruth Moyes, and I'll be presenting this findings from, or partial findings from, phase 1 of the Autistic School Staff Project with Madge Woolard, who will be introducing herself in more detail in a short while. And Dr. Rebecca Wood is the principal investigator of the Autistic School Staff Project. She's actually in the audience this evening. So if you do have any questions at the end that Madge and I are unable to answer, I'm sure Dr. will be able to pick those up for you sometime on the Discord server. The project itself is funded by the John and Lorna Wing Foundation, so we're very grateful for their funding. So a brief overview of what we're going to talk about in this presentation. First of all, I'm going to cover the two key principles of the Autistic School Staff Project, otherwise known as the ASSP. I'm going to give you a brief summary of the different project phases. And then I'm going to talk about the issues around the disclosure of autism by school staff and by staff working in schools from a peripatetic perspective as well. So not just those staff who work every day within a school. And these are things that have come out, findings that have come out from the research itself. We're going to talk about how disclosure will be explored in later phases of the project. And I'm also going to draw your attention to the project resources as they stand today. Then I'll hand over to Madge Woolard, and she will give her professional reflections on whether or not to disclose autism and from a personal perspective. And finally, I will sum up by looking at a few key findings from the project as they relate to the theme of disclosure of an autism identity. So the two pillars of the Autistic School Staff Project are, first of all, inclusion. So the thing that really underpins the whole project is the idea that in order to achieve inclusion within school for autistic pupils, we have to also look at how autistic staff and autistic adults are also included, because without that, we feel that there really is no chance of actually achieving proper educational inclusion. It has to be an ethos that runs throughout the school community. And the second pillar of the project is that of rights. So as autistic people, we all have rights to certain rights within the workplace, and these are underscored by things like the Autism Act 2009, the Equality Act 2010, and of course the Convention on the Rights of Persons with Disabilities. So these are all the things, these two key points or two pillars underpin everything to do with the Autistic School Staff Project. So just briefly to run through the different phases of the project. So phase 1 was a survey-based aspect to the project, and 149 participants contributed to that survey and responded to that initial phase of the project. And of those participants, 49 were no longer working in schools. So approximately 1/3 were no longer working in schools. Now, interestingly, the respondents held a breadth of positions. So we had trainee teachers through to heads. We had classroom teachers, we had teaching assistants, subject leaders, deputy heads, and so on. And we also had respondents from a range of different settings. So we had people who worked in mainstream as well as specialist settings, alternative settings, and from a range of different sectors as well. We had people who work in school every day, and we also, as I say, had peripatetic teaching staff, such as Madge, for example, or professionals who would go into a school from an educational perspective. And this is important because it means the findings really are from across the board. So we're not looking at what one narrow type of or position of responsibility might actually provide an answer to. These are views that are held across the board, across those range of positions and across those different sectors. So it's quite a comprehensive and generalised findings to the large part. So phase 2 of the project, and this is an iterative project, so one feeds into the next and it's developing as we go. So phase 2, we completed interviews with 33 participants from the first phase of the project who were invited. We invited people to have an interview with us if they wished to after that survey. And on this phase 2, I was the research assistant, Alan Morrison was the autistic consultant on the project, and there were 2 co-investigators at this point, the Professor Francesca Harpe, apologies I've missed an accent off her name there, and Dr. Laura Crane. And phase 2 is almost complete in terms of the actual doing of the research, and we're building up the resources that go alongside that and analysing the data. And the phase 3 will be the next section of the project, and that starts at the beginning of October, and I believe the first meetings for that have already taken place. That will have an international perspective, working with people from the USA and also from Poland, and it will also include autistic children and the parents of autistic children to get their input as well. And I'm sure you'll all know that co-investigator on that phase will be Dr. Damien Milton, and we're delighted that he can be involved in this 3rd phase of the project. So what did we find out with regard to disclosure of autism? So the first thing I wanted to just draw your attention to, which is quite interesting, is looking at those participants who were still working in a school and those who were no longer working in a school. And if you look at the first pie chart, first of all, so the ones working in a school, the orange, larger orange segment, those are people who disclosed their autism, and the blue section, so 35%, did not disclose that they were autistic. So of the people who were working in schools, the majority had disclosed that they were autistic. Conversely, if we look at the participants who were no longer working in school, we can see that the larger proportion, the majority, had not disclosed that they were autistic. And there are a number of reasons we could explore, and we'll talk about as we go through, that may explain that, and may also potentially relate to why they're no longer in school. So some of the things that our respondents talked to us about in terms of the negative impact of disclosing autism, or indeed the fear of disclosing autism. And as one of the respondents said, they felt that they were set up to fail effectively. So some of them talked about derogatory reactions when they disclosed that they were autistic, or indeed they feared that that's what the reaction would be. They experienced mistreatment and prejudice based on the fact that they disclosed that they were autistic. At least one participant had been told not to share their diagnosis with the parents of pupils, which made them feel, had a really bad impact on their own mental health, and really pointed out and underlined the fact that there was a stigma attached to being autistic in that particular school, which was really unpleasant. Some of them, the diagnosis was simply not believed, or the self-identification was not believed, which of course also leads into questions of how well people within the school understood autism, and how well therefore autistic pupils may or not be supported or understood. Some of them received no adjustments at all, even after disclosure, or no supports. So even though the environment was debilitating and stressful, there were no adjustments put in place for that. And some of them felt that their identity was completely invalidated, in actual fact. Some felt that their professional standing was questioned, their ability was questioned following diagnosis, following the disclosure of that diagnosis, as though somehow being autistic meant that you wouldn't be able to do your job as well as somebody who wasn't autistic. And for those who did not disclose, some of them feared actually losing work. So these might be people, so for example, one person who worked in an agency or as agency staff, and she felt very much that if she disclosed, she was very much at risk of losing any future work. And the language that participants heard being used by other staff about autistic pupils meant that some of them felt unsafe to disclose because the language was derogatory about autistic pupils, and therefore they felt that their disclosure of autism would not be received kindly or in a sympathetic and understanding way. So the impact for these people was very much on their own mental health. It had a negative impact on their mental well-being, and it also impacted on their ability to remain working in or with a school. You can see a quote down there from one of the teachers who responded, who said if they disclosed that they were autistic, they felt that they wouldn't be given the respect that they currently enjoyed. So let's now look at some of the benefits that participants expressed to us about disclosing autism. So we've got some really lovely quotes on the left-hand side that I'm just going to spend a couple of moments reading through for you. So first one's from a teaching assistant who said, "What I do love though is autistic kids' reactions when I tell them that I'm autistic, and they always receive it well and want to know about how I cope and about my experience." The second quote is from a teacher who says, "It has helped my colleagues have a better understanding about autism." And finally, parents get a positive vision that their own autistic children can achieve. And you'll see those quotes reflected in some of the points that I've listed on the right-hand side there. So first of all, one of the major benefits was a feeling that there was a better understanding of autism and appreciation of autism from the whole school community. So it wasn't just about the autistic member of staff, it was about everybody, because everybody benefited in that particular instance from being told about somebody being autistic and then being able to share that knowledge. Somebody mentioned that it led the whole school to being more autism friendly, and that the openness and honesty of the autistic member of staff was appreciated by pupils and parents. Some felt that being able to provide advice to other staff about how to adjust their teaching methods or adjust the teaching environment, the school environment, was really beneficial, not just to them, but also because other staff then took this learning on board and used that to work with their autistic children, with their autistic pupils. So again, that learning and that experience that was shared by the autistic member of staff was really helpful in generating that learning and the development that actually helped autistic children within the school. One person mentioned that they provided an autistic-led group for autistic pupils, so that, which hadn't happened before. This is something that she felt able to start as a result of being able to disclose and receiving a positive reaction from other staff within the school, and this peer group was really successful. And finally, a lot of them said that they felt like they were positive role models for autistic pupils, and importantly, for these autistic children's parents. So the theme of disclosure will be continued to be explored in phases 2 and 3. So phase 2, as I say, we've already completed the interviews for that, and we continue to include participants who no longer worked in schools. And the phase 2 interviews continue to explore this theme, and participants indeed did mention camouflaging and masking their autistic traits, as well as the benefits of being openly autistic under a supportive head. And one of the things that's come out of phase 2 is going to be an edited book which will explore issues of diagnosis in part, amongst other themes, and that's due for publication in 2022 by Jessica Kingsley. And you can see that the title of the book is going to be narratives and perspectives of autistic teachers facilitating diversity and inclusion in schools. And I was lucky enough to be able to contribute a chapter to that book myself, as did Madge, and I'm sure she'll tell you a bit more about that in a moment. And the chapters were all in fact contributed by autistic school staff, past and present. And of course, the issue of disclosure will doubtless be explored further in phase 3. So I mentioned that we already have some resources from the project. The website address is at the top of the screen, and there are 3 papers as well. Obviously, the first one, they're all free to access, free to download. The first one talks about the pilot study of autistic school staff. The second one is the journal article written on the views and experiences of autistic teachers from phase 1. And that is also free to access now, it's free to read. And the final one listed there are the experience and needs of autistic school staff, a summary report of the phase 2 COVID-19 findings. So please do follow along on the website, or indeed email us at the project, and we'll add you to the mailing list and keep you in touch that way too. And I'm going to hand over to Madge. Thank you, Madge.
Okay, thank you very much, Ruth. And it's been a great honour for me to be allowed to take part in this presentation this evening. I'm going to start by telling you a little bit about myself and my involvement in the Autistic School Staff Project. I run my own business teaching piano and keyboard, both privately and peripatetic in schools. I've done that since 1994. I received my autism diagnosis just 5 years ago. In 2019, I was awarded an Autism-Friendly Business Award from the National Autistic Society for my work with neurodivergent students. And I've contributed quite a lot to the Autistic School Staff Project in the last few months. I was a panellist on their webinar in April. I've contributed to their online resource, which you can now look up. And as Ruth said, I've written a chapter about my experiences in schools for their upcoming book, which should be out next year. So I'm going to talk a little bit about the pros and cons of disclosing a diagnosis. I know Ruth has already covered this, so I'd like to echo some of the issues that she has highlighted. I've compiled my own personal list, I wanted to put it all on one slide for you to see. I'm hoping that this will be relevant to any of you who are employed in any field, especially those of you who, like me, have a late diagnosis. So some of the cons, first of all, unfortunately, in the society that we live in today, we could well experience discrimination and increased marginalisation. And our colleagues probably have internalised some of the negative stereotypes around autism. So when we come to disclose that we're autistic, the next line in the conversation might be something like, oh, but you don't look autistic. Are you sure? You're not like little Johnny in year 3. Or what's your special ability? Or, oh, you must be so high functioning. And these conversations can be awkward for us. We may unfortunately have lower expectations placed upon us if we're wanting to rise up the career ladder. There may be a lack of understanding, and we might be regarded as less professional and less able to do a good job. So now I'll move on to some of the pros. If we do disclose a diagnosis, we're going to be more likely to get accommodations if they're needed. Things like having the lights dimmed, or maybe we'll need to take additional breaks. Maybe we'll need to sit by a window. Maybe we have a preference for electronic communication over telephone communication, things like that that can be accommodated. We may wish to deliver autism information sessions to the rest of the staff. This is not something that all of us can do or will want to do, but this is something we can do if we have disclosed. We can, as Ruth was saying earlier, be a role model for neurodivergent kids, or if we're in another form of work, just be a general role model for neurodivergence. And we do, as Ruth said, have basic rights to have our disabilities regarded and accommodations met at work. And this is an important one for me, so I've put it in bold, is being authentic. Because if we are able to be authentic at our work, it increases our sense of well-being. We're not investing energy in masking our autistic traits, so therefore we have more energy to give to our job, and we're more likely to suffer less mental health impacts. So it's important to be authentic. So you may be surprised to know that I actually haven't yet disclosed my autism identification in the 2 schools that I do currently work in. And you might be wondering why that is. It's because I do a very specific job within each school, which is to deliver music lessons to individuals within the school. And I'm only there 1 or 2 days a week. So I don't presently require any accommodations. And also, I don't want to risk further marginalisation, because I at the moment feel very much on the edge of the staff, only seeing them once or twice a week, and I'm not in their social circles. So if they knew I was autistic as well, they might be more likely to leave me out. But I would definitely like to feel safe to disclose my diagnosis in the future. And just a little update on my book chapter, which I'm hoping you'll all read when the book comes out next year. I have resigned from the other school I used to work at because it caused me some sensory distress. And would it have been a different story if I had disclosed my diagnosis and been able to get accommodations? Or who knows? So some personal conclusions from me. I think there are analogies with coming out as LGBT. I've been an out lesbian for over 20 years, and so I know all about that. I do realise that coming out is hard. We have a lot of internalised ableism, especially those of us who are late diagnosed will have picked up all the negative stereotypes as well. And another thing is, being of the age that I am, I'm not from the generation that grew up with social media, so I'm not used to sharing lots of things about myself in the way that younger people are, which is not necessarily a good thing. I think it's great the way young people share stuff, but it's taking me a while to get there. So that's a bit of an explanation, but not an excuse. So coming out is very much a matter of personal choice and very much determined by individual circumstances. For example, if I had a homophobic family or lived in a homophobic country, I might not be able to be so open about my sexuality. So I'd just like to conclude by saying that issues faced by autistic school staff will only be improved if we do feel able to be open about our diagnoses. And as you can see, there is still much work to be done. Now, thank you very much, and I'll hand you back to Ruth now. Thank you.
Thanks, Madge. Okay, so the key findings relating to disclosure from phase 1, first of all, starting with pillar 2, the rights. So first of all, it's really important to note that autistic school staff do have the right not to reveal they are autistic. So it's very much a personal choice. And Madge and I completely agree on this one. But fear of disclosure means that rights cannot be accessed. And this can lead to exhaustion and burnout, to poor mental health, to not seeking promotion when perhaps otherwise a teacher, for example, or a teaching assistant may have considered that at some point beforehand. Or it may lead to them leaving the profession, as we saw with about 1/3 of the participants from the survey. Some school managers reportedly, despite there being legislation in place which should support their rights, some school managers reportedly did not provide the accommodations autistic staff needed, despite them having rights to disability-specific support and to adjustments in the workplace. And that was really difficult to hear. And as Madge said, it shows there's still much work to be done. And no participants made reference either to government support schemes for disabled employees, such as the Access to Work or the Work and Health programme. And the quote at the bottom of the screen there is actually from Dr. Wood and Professor Harpay's paper, "How can we hope to effectively include disabled pupils if we do not I can't actually read the bottom of the screen there because the text is coming across, the actual teletext type text is coming across. If we do not focus on diversity, if we do not support disability, diversity and inclusion in the school staff. And then the other of the two pillars, the key findings relating to disclosure for pillar 1, inclusion. So some participants did report poor attitudes towards autistic pupils, and that reinforced, as we say, that fear of disclosure. However, without disclosure, full inclusion is not facilitated. So feeling safe to disclose is the key to better experiences. It enabled a sense of being valued and accepted by colleagues through their ability to facilitate the inclusion of autistic pupils. So they had their skill sets and their strengths recognised by colleagues, and actually that recognition was also important. And being open and authentic, using Madge's word there, to be authentic, brought benefits to participants, yes, which was great on an individual basis, but also and importantly brought those benefits to the whole school community. And another quote at the bottom of the screen there, this is a quote from one of the participants in the survey that I just want to leave you with, who said, "I feel that in my place of work, I can be completely myself. And I feel that has helped the children that I work with, and it has also helped my colleagues have a better understanding about autism." And I think if we can be somewhere in our workplace where we do feel we can be completely ourselves, that can only be a good thing. So thank you very much for your kind attention. We finished a couple of minutes early, but we'd like to now invite you please to ask any questions you may have. And if there are any questions you ask to which we do not know the answer, we will endeavour to find out over the next few days. Thank you very much.